that person, God's not going to force them to change, but God will put them with others who are just like them. And if you can
Right.
imagine a whole bunch of people who want to hurt others all together, what's that going to look like? It's
Purge.
not going to be good.
It was like the Purge series. I don't know if you ever
Right.
saw it, but that's
Oh,
what it
yeah.
looks like.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let me start with the questions that I had. And let's start with the thing that I told you about before. So remember when I first was looking for you, there was someone on Facebook who was like, his stories,
Oh,
he's
right.
a fraud and all this stuff. And everybody else was kind of like asking them, like, why are you saying that? Like, kind of just trying to get and no response. So I just assumed, just from my experience in life, that this means it's just somebody who's upset. But from your experience, like, why would you say this person is saying that?
Sure. I've shared my experience to a number of other channels, and um, most of the comments are pretty positive or nice, but there's some that are just negative towards me, uh, accusing me of all kinds of different things, I guess. I feel like any person who shares anything, if enough people comment and say what they want to say, which is fine, like they're just going to attract some sort of negativity eventually. And I feel like I've been actually pretty fortunate that most of the responses have been positive, but I think it's inevitable that I'm going to attract some sort of negative attention. I know that I'm not a perfect person at all, and what I've shared is not perfect at all. I think it's pretty good, but it's certainly not perfect. But even if I could share a perfect version of what's going on in our life and the afterlife and God, if I was completely perfect, there would be people who would completely criticize me and call me all kinds of different names. So I don't take it personally, that someone wants to criticize me. I think that's fine. Let them say whatever they want to say, and people can make their own decisions. I want to share my experience because I think it can be helpful to others, and I think there's a couple pieces of my experience that I haven't really heard in other experiences that personally I think could help someone who wants to understand how it all works. I think it could help them to put a couple extra pieces together and understand it a little better.
Yes.
Um, I'm going to get haters like anyone else. It's
Yes,
okay.
yes. And I think it's because it kind of messes with their foundational beliefs and people don't really know how to
Right.
respond to that. And that's, it is what it is. But just wanted to make sure that, just for people, and I've done that, not to say I've done that, 'cause I'm pretty much trying not to be that person, but there were a few NDEs where I just didn't understand what was happening. And so I responded in a way that I kind of looked back at my question and said, oh, I better fix that.
Right.
Because people don't understand NDEers, they go through sometimes traumatic experiences where their body is never the same or their mind's never the same, their life is never the same. So we
Right.
have to be sensitive to that and just be very careful how we're commenting and the questions that we're asking. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that for that reason. Okay, so you said at one point you had questions and that you had each question answered.
Right. Yeah. I was kind of just during my near death experience, I was floating next to my body in the spiritual realm, and I would start thinking up questions like, what am I? Why am I here? What's going on? And when I would have that kind of question, like the answer would come to me very clearly, like replaying all these different situations and events that I had previously been part of. It was all replayed for me very clearly so that my question was answered perfectly, so that I could totally understand the answers to these questions. I mean,
Mm,
I'm not sure exactly why or how this works, but it's like we're all spiritually connected to something higher than us. Um,
yes.
and the answers were just, they were there they were available to me in complete perfection without really much effort on my part. And I'm not, I don't know why or how that all works, but it did.
Mm. Yeah, and you're not the first person to say this. Like comes up in a lot of NDEs where they say there's a point. I think you have to get to a certain point. You literally have to have some time pass from after leaving your body, and you have to get maybe to a certain point, which I don't know how to explain that other than that. But it's like you're connecting to divine intelligence or intelligent infinity or these
Right.
different ideas, like you said, and we're definitely connected. If we're connected to God, then we would have some access, to that information. So that's awesome. That's
Right.
everything. What did the being of light, uh, the one that told you not to leave your body, what did they look like?
All right. So um, it's kind of hard to describe. It was very, very, very briefly that I got a glimpse of this being before I was like sent back to my body. But it was absolutely beautiful. Just
Oh,
completely beautiful beyond anything you can imagine. And one thing that I think really, it was like a person made of light. But one thing that I think really stood out to me was that the person was translucent. Okay, I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, and we see each other's surface features, our skin and our facial features. But for this being of light, I could see like into them and through them. And so I could see the surface level features, but then also like inside, there was more complicated physical, or not physical, but features that they had their own beauty to them that I couldn't begin to describe. So
wow.
it's like, we have our position of our eyes and nose and mouth, but for the spiritual being, this angel or whatever it was, there was internal parts that I could see their orientation and shape and how they were all oriented. And somehow they had a deeper meaning. Like if you were a high level angel or soul looking at another high level angel or soul, you could see all those internals and understand what it meant, and it would like tell you more about what kind of experience this soul had, who it was. Like there was a lot of information there that I couldn't understand, but I could see the beauty of it, and I thought it was really, to me, it's really interesting that this three-dimensional internal features that have meaning on
Mm.
that level, or for these beings of light that we don't have here.
Wow, wow, wow. And so this brings up two questions. The first is if this being told you that you shouldn't be out of your body, and this isn't the first time I've heard that in an NDE, where it's kind of
Okay.
like maybe not safe to be out of your body, or well, I'm assuming that that's what they mean. So let me take that assumption back. So maybe they're just saying that you weren't supposed to, like literally, it wasn't part of the plan. Is that what you kind of think they were saying, or that it wasn't safe?
I got the feeling like, well, I was a kid, so that might influence how I view this, but I got the feeling like it was almost like I had spiritually misbehaved. I had done
Oh,
something that maybe I wasn't meant to do. I had kind of like bent the rules, the spiritual rules, by leaving my body, and I wasn't supposed to do that. I don't really understand it, but uh, I was definitely, this angel or whatever it was wanted me back in my body like right away, and I ended up right back in my body.
wow, wow, wow. Yeah, I don't want to say too much on that because I obviously it seems like you might not know exactly what their
Right.
purpose was for that. Like there's some things we just can't know, but it just makes me wonder because you have people who are now like making the circuit of trying to help people astral travel and get out of their
Right.
body, and you have some people who have had these experiences that make it very clear that they come across things that are trying to put them right back in their body, like saying, nope, you got to get
Right.
back in.
Well,
But
I've used what I was told as specifically for me. I'm not trying to tell anyone else
yeah,
not
yeah,
to ask. I definitely don't mean it that way. I mean, what this guy told me was I took it as meant specifically for me and only for me.
yeah. Okay, okay. So I'm not
And
gonna go any
in the
deeper than
situation,
that.
right?
Okay. All
I,
right.
I'm I don't want anybody trying to read into that.
Okay, okay. And did you feel love? Like I don't recall like did you feel the unconditional love that people talk about or the unconditional peace? Like some people feel it more as a
Right.
peace or a calm as opposed to love, but did you feel that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Being with God, the love and compassion, and it's just wonderful. Okay. But I can also now recognize that as a immature soul, I couldn't fully appreciate that. And I feel like the more we grow and move to higher levels, the more we're going to be able to appreciate that unconditional love and compassion. But I mean, that's just the overwhelming majority of what I experienced, was that on the other side, there's just so much love and kindness and compassion and all that stuff. It's just wonderful. Uh,
Hmm.
but there is the negative side for people who are in that kind of mindset. No one's going to force them to change. They're going to stay in that kind of mindset when they leave this planet. But the vast majority are, even though we all get angry, we all have bad days, and there's people we don't like or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who really, really, really hate everybody, kind of thing. Um, but for the vast majority, I think this is a very, when we go to the other side, it's going to be wonderful.
Hmm. You mentioned that you were working with your spiritual guides prior. Like at one point, you said you were working with them, I guess, to like you said to create the life, right?
Right,
And I'm also assuming that they're the same spiritual guides, because people say that spiritual guides change throughout our different lives. But you're saying that these particular ones needed permission to remove the memory that you had.
right,
As a child. And I like that they asked you because there are some people who have experiences where it's just removed. Like they
right.
almost make it feel as if it's like, and do you think that that was because of your level of spirit, your current spiritual level that
Right.
you were given that option?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know. I think the guides that I talked to when I was 6 were the same guides that I had worked with uh, before I ever came to this planet, or before I became Aaron Green. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, why they needed my permission, but as you say, some people say they didn't get asked permission. I don't know.
Mm. Okay, okay. Just some things that we can think about. I mean,
Yeah,
all right,
I've thought
so
about that, and I don't
yeah,
know.
okay. All right, so you said 10 years ago you received the memories back. And I get excited when people have this experience because I feel like I had an NDE. Like I was always getting beat up and I was always in the hospital as a kid. So I have a few
Okay.
memories that I feel like are distant. So I'm just waiting for that day I watch an NDE and it just all comes back. But I love when that happens for people.
Okay.
It's the trigger recall, right? And I think it's very key that your trigger came from Eben Alexander. I hope I'm saying his name right, but because it just sounds like in this particular avatar in this life you seem to be, being an engineer, and I think engineers are everything. I think they're awesome, but being an engineer you're definitely probably using a different part of your brain, as opposed to maybe an artist or writer.
Right. Yeah.
And he was very similar, and I think he was a neuroscientist, right?
Right.
So in seeing somebody who you could relate to in this avatar having that experience probably was exactly what you needed for everything to just fly back. And the question I have here is, did it all come back at once, or was it in but gradually?
I would say maybe half of it came back at once, and then like bits and pieces trickled in over the next years.
Mm,
Um, it was a significant amount right there at that moment, but then lots of little pieces have come to me over the years. Things I've remembered, little parts here and there, and
yes,
I've been working at piecing it all together and trying to understand it all.
yes. And that's why I have this series called the NDE downloads, because that's kind of what we kind of consider downloads. Like you're just gradually getting fed the
Right.
information again.
Yeah.
Cool, cool, cool. All right, and so the life review, I don't know if you mentioned this, or if you can, we can pass it if you mentioned it, but what did it look like? 'Cause some people see like screens, like it's more like a high tech type thing. Some people
Okay.
see just, you know,
Um, I guess I felt like it was kind of like being an outsider watching all these people, um, like a fly on the wall kind of view, and
mm,
I could see all the different people in a room, for example, and understand exactly what everyone was doing and thinking, and how specifically my actions were influencing them and affecting them. Um, again, I was only 6, so I think my life was shorter at that point. Um, but what really stood out was that I could feel how I had made them feel.
mm,
Um,
mm. Okay, and the next question, I believe you at some point, I don't know if you said it now or in a previous interview, said that you saw the face of God, or you saw what God looked
right.
like. And so, for some people, this is something that they can't even, maybe it might be blasphemous for them. So, but
Okay.
just, for everybody, for every NDE clearly is different. And then maybe, this is a being that is infinite, has all
Yes.
power,
Yes.
and can appear as anything to anyone. So it
Right.
could just be the way that you needed or wanted to see God.
Yep.
But can you share what that looked like?
Yeah. So during my re-experiencing of my early spiritual existence before I ever came to Earth, one thing God had asked me was if I wanted to see God's face, and I said yes, and uh, it felt like this was an honor or a privilege, and my attention was turned, and I saw a giant sun-like entity that was just enormous, but um, it was kind of like it was one entity, but there was millions and millions, or billions and billions of souls all together in that entity. Um, and each of these souls was simultaneously part of God, and yet simultaneously maintained their own independence. It was like they had the best of both worlds from that point of view. And some of those entities or souls came to the surface, and as they came to the surface, their face became more clear. So it's like, to me, the face of God was a giant sun with thousands of individual faces all together that formed. They maintained their individuality, but then it was like one giant multi-faced sun is what I saw.
Mm. Yes, and when I heard this, this made me so happy. Because I had mentioned this before, but when I fully understood that God, it has no partner, has no creator, like this being to me, like I literally would have weeks, not full weeks crying, but I would just every now and then think about this being alone in all existence, and I would just start crying like a complete weirdo.
Right.
Um, but when I realized that part of maybe what we're, and then you can, I mean, you can even go into this, or I have a question that might tie into this later. But maybe part of the reason why some beings have said that they live on planets where they have no free will. Now, I love that you keep expressing that it is very big that we have free will. So there are
Right.
some, from what I've heard, beings that they all have like a hive mind. They're kind of just doing the will of God, like an angel would, you know.
Right.
But that I feel like this experiment that we're currently in, we're part of free will. I call it the free will experiment, that maybe part of it is so that God is not alone, that it could have these beings that are part of it, that can be autonomous and yet still part of it, you know. So kind of like building its own family is what I've kind of, my little download. And that makes me, if it is there any truth to it, makes me extremely happy to think that this being is able to create a family and to not ever be alone in essence.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that works for me. I don't. I don't know.
I
Um,
know.
God is wonderful, and I don't fully understand this whole plan at all. But once we get past these short hardships, it's all going to be wonderful, and we're going to be part of whatever it is that God has planned out, and it's going to be fantastic.
Yes, yes. So the question I had next was one I had after watching your other interviews, but you actually, I think, to some extent answered it here. Because when you were talking about your pre-birth experience or pre-life experiences, it sounded as if you were a new soul. And so I was just like, my question for you would have been, have you lived other lives? So like now I understand it, that this story that you're telling of the pre-life, it's not pre-Aaron Green. Is it pre every life that you've
So
lived?
there was two main points in my existence that were shown to me. One was before I ever came to Earth, when I was just leaving this soul nursery, and we start off as part of a group that I've heard called the soul group. It was like me and maybe a couple hundred or a couple thousand other souls, and that forms a unique bond. And when you meet someone in your soul group, that's a a special connection that you feel with them. But anyway, um, I saw or re-experienced that part, which was before I ever came to Earth. And then I also re-experienced the part right before I became Aaron Green. Okay. And
Mm,
so before I became Aaron Green, it was very clear that that many lifetimes had passed between when I was back with God and when I became Aaron Green.
mm,
And so when I share my experience, there's kind of two different points that I'm talking about. And so my perspective as a soul during those different points was a little bit different, and my understanding was a little bit different.
mm. That totally clears it up for me. Those two
Okay.
different experiences. So you clearly believe in reincarnation. Do you believe that these lives are happening simultaneously?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, I've come to the understanding that time, space, and matter are just a physical, almost illusion. Like for God, there's no time, there's no different space. There's only one entity, which is God. And the way I see it is there is no time. Okay, it's just an illusion that allows us to do what we need to do to make this physical reality work. So you could either say they're all happening simultaneously, or you could say they're all happening at different times. I think uh, I guess either way you want to look at it is fine. Um, it feels like there's a sequence to these to me, but also it becomes complicated and difficult to put your finger on as a person, because we're so trapped by time that when you realize that, hey, well, God's not trapped by God and the spiritual realm's not quite trapped by God, that it becomes hard to understand. But like when I do something dumb in one life and there's a consequence in another life, those events are directly tied together across time and space, and somehow it just works perfectly, even
Yeah.
if I can't really understand it.
Yes, yes, yes. I think it's just one of those things that, like a lot of people are saying they've experienced this. They come back and say that this is real, that there is no time.
Right.
But we, like you said, in our current bodies, this human brain can't really comprehend that.
Oh,
And
yeah. Are you familiar with, you ever heard of Einstein's theory of relativity?
mhm.
You ever heard of that? Well, it turns out that a light particle, like an object moving at the speed of light, it doesn't experience time. Like they can prove this different ways. It gets all complicated, but basically, a photon of light can go from one end of the universe all the way to the other, and for that photon of light, no time passes. And to
Mm.
me, that offers further proof that for God, who I see as kind of like the light, like they don't experience time the way we experience it.
Yes, yes.
Like there is
And
no
I,
time.
and I've heard this with other people who supposedly interact with angels, and they say that angels can't even come, they can't give us, they don't understand how we're moving in time. Like it's just different. They
Right.
don't see it the same way. Everything's happened already.
Right.
Um, and Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
realizing that
And,
some of
and
these. Oh,
can I
go
say
ahead.
one more thing about that?
Yes, sir.
Is because for God there is no time. God can balance all these different lives together perfectly, and yet and we still maintain our free will, because God's not limited by time. And so
Mhm.
when you take that out of the equation, then it makes more sense that God can work all this different lives together and allow us to have free will without violating any kind of uh, you know without it not working.
Yes, yes. And I'm glad you said that because I know I was forgetting something and you just helped jog my mind back to it. And so there was another NDEer who had a very quantum-like experience. So really was kind of like quantum leaping through his
Okay.
experiences or lives. And he kept mentioning that there was one life that he had where he was like a younger boy in another part of the United States at a different time. And he realized, he never goes deep into this really, so, but like I said, your experience is bringing this up. He realized that what he did in one life could make the other one harder or less hard.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally.
So just imagine, and it's like, they say which comes first, the chicken or the egg. So like in without time, there is, both,
Yeah.
right?
It's the
So
same thing.
so it's like if in one life I am a tyrant, in another one I'm, a slave, you know, what I'm doing as a tyrant could very much be affecting my life as a slave,
Right.
or
And
vice
and I
versa.
and I was able to see some of that more directly. I saw directly that me beating up this one guy, hundreds of years ago, directly tied into me getting a broken nose in this life. Like they were, directly related to each other. So I'm
Wow.
trying to be a little smarter now and be nice to other people and help other people, so that when I'm here next time, hopefully it's an easier journey. You know, People are always focused on the past and mistakes they made in the past. Well, I want to flip that around and say, well, look, you're sowing the seeds right now for what your future is going to look like. Make good decisions, help other people, be kind, and you
Yes,
can set yourself up for a much more pleasant existence. We all can.
yes. And imagine even more so, because like remember, without time, I'm telling you, it really just changes the game. So it's like, what if you're doing positive things in the future and it's negating or changing what that other you that's like around going around killing everybody with a machete, like it kind of something just makes him stop and say, wait a minute, I don't want to do this.
Right,
So it's
right,
like that changes the game completely. Like when you think that you're quantum, like what you're doing now and in the future can change the past, like you can really just clear up a lot of karma that way in itself, I guess. So
right.
I don't
I'm
know
hoping.
how it works. And it'll be even better. Look, even better if we had like if there was some not to say a cheat, but just a way that you could, through visualization, meditation, or those good deeds or intention, clear up that part of you that's out there just doing a whole bunch of crap right now, like
Right.
or me doing a whole bunch of stuff. Do something where we can communicate with that being to get them on the up and up, so that there's less karma to ever clear up even past this
Right.
life.
Right.
That would be cool.
Well, hopefully, your channel and channels like this one, they get the message out there to everyone that, hey, we need to be nice to each other.
Yes, yes. If I mean, we were mentioning before that pretty much all religions have the golden rule in some form or another,
Right.
and that really is kind of the only, on this planet at least, the only rule you really need to live by, or we need to live
Right.
by, you
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other things I have here, I don't know if they're questions or just things I was writing because of what you were saying. So you said, we're created with free will. So if you kind of do the math, the logic math there, you realize that there has to be evil. It's something that
Yeah.
God knows nobody really wants to deal with, but to some extent there has to be. It has to be in order to have contrast, to have that duality, a test or a challenge. Otherwise, you can't make a choice if there's
Right.
no variety of choices. Now, with that said, where is this evil coming from? Is it like when you're playing a game, because a lot of this is kind of simulation game type stuff that we're talking about here. Is it like when it's the computer player coming in as these different, monsters and you got to attack them? So is it really just an illusion or something that God is just kind of putting there in your place, but it's not another soul behind this? Because people do talk about non-player characters, so that could
Right.
kind of explain some of that. Or, and it could be all of these, because I know that we're in a convoluted universe, but these are just my options. So that is it that people are playing roles. There's other people who say they go through hypnotherapy and they feel that some of us literally come in to play the role of a bad guy. And that's a big
Right.
controversial thing there. Or is it just people who have fallen, who really have just through the process of life and the choices they made and not responding quote unquote properly to these choices, just start degrading and devolving and just, becoming this evil?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I, I don't have answers to that. I saw clearly that there were, to some degree, some bad guy type roles that souls agreed to. But then I think also with free will, we're going to make mistakes, and people choose the they choose the negative stuff because it's available to them. It's an option, and I guess I see it as a mix. Some amount of this negativity I think is inevitable so that we can learn and grow because we can, by watching the news or some of the bad stuff in the world, I say to myself, wow, that's horrible. I don't want any part of that. And so I'm benefiting from that negativity by realizing that I don't want any part of that, that it's bad and I want to do the opposite. And that's only possible in a place like this where that negative kind of stuff is allowed to exist. But I think humans, they take it too far. We make mistakes, we do the wrong things, and I think this world could be a lot better if people made different choices. And it's kind of up to us to make those choices and try to move this world in a better place.
Yes, yes. Um, so I have so many good questions here, but I know that there's probably one of the basic questions that I should make sure that is clear. What was your religious background as a child, and then did that change because of the NDE, and if it did, what is it now?
So I was raised a Catholic, and I never really considered myself Catholic. I always, as a little kid, some of the ideas about the Pope I never really agreed with. I really connected with the idea of the existence of God. Like that was, I had no problem with that. That was always good for me. I basically was raised a Christian, but I consider myself more of a, you know, people should do what Jesus said to do kind of Christian rather than people need to, scream Jesus and have a cross. Like to me, there's a big difference between a lot of the Christians who claim that they love Jesus to those who actually do what Jesus suggested that they do. To me, that's a big difference.
Mm.
But my experience was hidden as a child, so it didn't really play too much into
Oh yeah.
develop. Now, being raised basically a Christian, as I see it, I view the Christian church as being kind of a really good place to start. But I think as you grow in your understanding, all these different religions, they kind of hold you back and prevent you from growing and learning some of the stuff that's out there. And I think in Christianity specifically, that I don't understand why people feel shackled to the same greater organization that defended slavery, that was responsible for the Crusades, that defended pedophile priests and pastors, and all the mistakes that the Christian church has made. It should be self-evident that, hey, these guys hundreds of years ago, they didn't get it all right. They made mistakes. And I don't know why you feel like you should be shackled to someone's understanding from 500 years ago rather than embrace some of this information that near-death experiencers and other sources are providing that can really help you grow in your understanding about God.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of my view at this point. Is my religion is, I think the Dalai Lama said like that. His religion was kindness and compassionate and peace, and that's kind of my religion now. Is I think Jesus came here to teach us a message to love others, to be kind, compassionate, honest, all this kind of stuff. And that's really my focus, is on just living the kind of life, the kind of loving life that I saw during my experience and other experiencers have described, that
Mm.
leads us back to God, which is all those godly characteristics of compassion,
Yeah.
kindness, forgiving, honesty, fairness. I could go on and on, but hopefully you
No,
get.
and I totally get the point, and I totally agree with what you came across as well, what you concluded about religions and going into like spirituality, which is us. I mean, as spirits, anything
Right.
we kind of do is spirituality if you think about it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so religions have their purpose in regards to maybe community, building community, and getting you the foundation.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they kind of are created for control, and maybe I can't even say maybe not now, but like definitely they caught, a lot of wars were, created and
Yeah.
in the name of religion. And holy war is like a oxymoron. Like how could a war be holy ever? Like just
Right.
really think
Right.
about that. But yes, I like that more people are kind of waking up and understanding that, because it really is just like blind following, which they, blind
Mhm.
faith, which from your experience, I'll think about it. The reason why they got rid of that memory was saying that faith is important. So there is a point where faith is a necessity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's also a point where you can I don't believe that my creator, which is all of our creators, I don't believe that our creator has a problem with any of its beings, its creations, its
Right.
children asking questions. The only people who don't like people asking questions are people who are doing something wrong. Like they got something to
Yeah.
hide. So if God is all these great things and he's like, ask away. And then I love that. Think about it also, that when people get to a certain point, they've literally been asked. Like, so there's always a light being or God or something saying, what questions do you have? So just think
Right.
about that. Even on the other side, one of the first things is just like, let me get you information. What do you need to know? What do you need to know? So we should be that same way of truth seeking here. Like,
Right.
why not?
Right.
Yeah. So and then so I love the idea. I mean, okay, so I right now, and because of current events, I am going through, like, I don't want to say a dark time, but just like I'm not happy. I'm very concerned about us as a species,
Right. Right.
and so I'm trying to let my vibration go too low, but I am concerned. I'll say that much, right? So when I get to this point, I start looking around like soul trap. Is it really, is this a prison planet? Like what's really happening here? I start going down that rabbit hole. But I generally love the idea of this being a school and a boot camp. I do, and like that is my ultimate belief. Did you see anything about this? And even an experiment, we're an experiment of sort. I see that as well. But do you see anything that would make you believe? Because there's people who literally are starting whole like groups of people who believe in it being a soul trap, and how do we get out, and what do we do when we get out of the body? Do we go up here? Do we not look at the light? Do we do this? It's a real thing for some people.
Right.
Did you
Right.
experience any part of that? Anything that would make you think that that is the actual case of being
What, that we're
bamboozled?
just trapped here forever?
Well, I mean, because they even say if there is somebody who would have that belief and would listen to your story, and then maybe, I mean, some stories are easier to kind of mess with, but I mean, yours is pretty straightforward. But just maybe say that maybe the guides, they call them like handlers or something like that. Maybe the guides were really like these archons or these negative energies,
Oh, right,
and that
right. Yeah, I've
yeah,
heard some of
this
it.
like they're telling you the reason why you have to have acne is for growth, but it's really because it's going to cause all this negative emotion, and they'll be able
Right,
to suck
right.
that energy or something, right? You know what I mean?
Okay.
So yeah,
Look, look. When it comes down to it, God is wonderful, and God is running this show. Okay. I know this is difficult. Our life is difficult, but at the end of the day, God's running this, and it's wonderful. The plan is wonderful, and we're eventually going to get through this, and we're going to get to something much better. Like that was really clear to me. There's a purpose for this life. It's not some just trap for nothing with no purpose. There's a very specific purpose, and this life is actually helping us get to where we need to be. And if you think you're in a trap, or no matter what you view this world as, the way to move past where we are currently to get to somewhere better is through compassion, kindness, honesty, empathy, respect, love. All of those positive uh, mindsets, and the actions that follow from those mindsets. That's what's going to move us to the next level. That's what's going to help us to move past this kind of the misery and frustration in this world. If people had more compassion and love for their neighbor, I think, a lot of the problems that we see wouldn't exist. Um,
mm,
but you know, I think you got to remember that God's running the show, and God is
mm,
wonderful, and God's not doing something that's meaningless or without purpose. Um, it's
yeah,
all wonderful at the end of the day, and we're going to get through this. We're not going to be here forever.
yeah.
Like that was very clear.
Yes, and I think I like that you started it with just saying like, God's running the show, because I've
Right.
noticed that when I look at the particular again, it always goes back to logic, but when I look at the foundation of that belief, you can't really truly trust or believe in a God that is all powerful. Because even if it's allowing a soul trapped, and it's allowing it for a reason. So it's just
Right.
like they clearly are missing that part of it, I think. So I like that you said that this world is an ugly reflection of the spiritual realm. Um,
Right.
are you speaking of Earth in particular, or you mean like the physical 3D, like any planet that's on this level of,
Yeah,
advancement?
I mean this entire physical reality. That's kind of how I meant it.
Okay, okay.
And
And so,
everything down to the smallest atom. The structure of a tree, the family, the physical constants that dominate our universe. I mean, everything.
yeah.
It's all has some sort of base truth in the spiritual realm.
So as above, so below, but just distorted. Okay.
Yeah, we're this physical realm is the ugly version. There's a more perfect,
Yeah.
beautiful side of all this stuff.
And I like that you say that, because I know that there's people, I mean, I speak for myself, but I know that there are so many, we got to remember there are so many good people out there. Like, no matter how hard life gets, you're not the only one who's feeling like this, or
Right,
has
right.
good intentions. And so for the people who maybe came here as helpers, we're going to get into that. And I love the fact that your mother is a helper. Everything about this was just like so exciting. But for the people who come here from higher vibrational spaces, we call them star seeds now,
Right,
or
right.
they come as the helpers, the volunteers, etc., and they come in to help. It's going to feel even more dark and dreary for you, because this is not even your vibe. You know what I mean? Like, you kind
Yeah,
of go to a party and you're like, this is not my vibe. I'm not
yeah,
feeling this.
yeah. If you like hate other people, and then you're watching the news and see some of this horrible stuff, you're probably like, okay, well that's fine. But if you're a loving person who's developing into the kind of soul that you need to be, you're going to look at the news and be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I don't
Yeah,
I don't want this to be going on in the world. I just
yeah.
want people to be happy. And so I think you're right that it's going to be harder for people as they progress to be living in this kind of rough existence.
Yeah, yeah. So I just wanted to mention that for the people who do feel that they really, feel like this place, but at the same time that you're feeling, oh my God, this is hell. Like, how did I get here? Why am I here?
Right,
You have to know that you're here on a mission. Then, if you feel like that, you must know without question. You could have every other purpose, because we can have multiple purposes, but
right,
one for sure is that you are here on a mission to make it better somehow, either a
right.
small, tiny little way or a big way. You're here to make it better.
Yeah,
So
and you can make the journey a little easier instead of focusing on the problem or the difficulties. Focus on the solution, or where we're supposed to go. And if you focus on the love, compassion, kindness, all that stuff, helping your neighbor, random acts of kindness, all this kind of stuff, you're going to get your head a little bit out of the frustrations of the problems in this world, and you're going to make this journey a little bit easier for yourself and for others, just by focusing on the solution, which is for us to act more like God intended.
Yes, perfect, perfect. So another part that I got excited about here was you said that the sun is like a correlation to God, and this would explain why some people back in the day would worship the sun. I guess they felt that connection as well.
Right.
And in like the law of one, the raw material, they say that the suns or the logos, and I guess logi would be the plural, but that they are kind of like it's like like if you had to command a chain of command, it would be God, and then you would have the sons, and then I've had an NDE, or Rafael Garcia, who mentioned that when he was a son, like he embodied a son, that he realized that there was this great central sun, which what we would call God or source, and that it was pulling information out to those smaller, to the suns of each universe or whatever system, star system,
Right.
and giving them the information that would then come to us in through the rays. So what I like about what you're saying, because like I said, that kind of correlates to everything I've heard before, is that you said heat correlates to wisdom, which is everything, and
Uh-huh.
then you said that light correlates to love.
Right.
So when you said that, I started thinking, because I mean, in general, right now I'm freezing because I'm in my apartment, but I've people have said that when like if an angel comes to visit, it sometimes I've heard this before, that the room will get hotter, like it'll feel warmer. And the same token, if a ghost comes or a spirit or a dark spirit, you'll generally feel the room, the
Right.
temperature will go down. So that made me just think of that immediately. I'm like, oh wow, there really might be something there. And then, with light being love, we talk about love and light, like that is a thing that a lot of people believe. So I definitely love that you mentioned those two things. Um, so you said you had tons of options. You're, again, not the first person to say this, so this is
Okay.
awesome. You're confirming this. Tons of options of planets. I must not have gotten that option because I can't imagine why I would ever come here and do this. Like I'm still, I wake up some mornings just like, really, really,
Right.
why, you know? But uh, were they at the same level of development spiritually?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I did get the sense that this is a more difficult planet than most. I'm not like I don't really understand it all. There was definitely way more planets than just the Earth, but I don't really have a good idea if some were higher level than this or lower level. I'm not quite sure. My speculation is that Earth is one of the lower levels that you can get to in this universe. But I wouldn't think that we would be the only planet at this level. I suspect there's lots of other ones that at our same level. Um, I don't know. I don't know to answer your question, other than that, yeah, there's lots of other stuff going on out there, and they're
Mhm.
not, they don't all look exactly like us, or they have the same exact kind of problems that we have. But
Yeah.
they're all spiritual entities having some sort of physical incarnation because it allows them to grow and develop.
Yes, yes. And this confirms what a lot of other people say. Like, this is kind of becoming the norm of what we're hearing. Have you had any ET or alien experiences in this avatar?
No, no, I've Aaron Green has never experienced anything, nothing like that at all. No.
Let's keep referring to ourselves in the third person. It's going to be awesome. It helps you to realize
Right.
that this is a separate life than who you are.
Yeah, like I've tried to get in the habit of, when I refer to this body, to talk about the body rather than me, because
Yes.
me, who I really am, is more and different than just this body. So I'm kind of in that habit of saying me when I mean my body, but really,
Yeah.
I've recognized that we're all so much more than just these physical bodies we're riding around in.
Yes, yes. And I mean, just so that you know where I'm coming from, I had an OBE as a child. So once you have that experience, you understand that when you're looking down at your body, that's not me. As soon as that
Oh,
you have that moment.
oh, I did have one other little tidbit I wanted to share. I thought
Mhm.
this was really interesting. So at one point I asked the guides about, like, can a soul move to another planet? Here we are, we're on this planet, we're going through this adventure. What if we wanted to go to another planet and try some other place? And basically I was told that, yeah, that's possible, but it's relatively rare. What a soul would need to do is that they couldn't come to a planet and leave it worse off than it would be if they had never come here. Okay, they have
Mhm.
to fix all their karma or correct all the mistakes that they've made and make it so that their net contribution to the planet has been positive. But when they get to that level, then they would be able to go to another planet, but they would have to start over again at the lowest level. And I'm not exactly sure what the lowest level it is, but they would have to start like way back at the beginning. But I was also shown that there absolutely are souls that will get fed up with the planet, just get so mad at the difficulties and that other souls there that they're going to get fed up and they're going to want to leave, and that some of them actually will do that, but it's relatively rare because most you're kind of giving up some of the progress you've made. You kind of got to redo it. The
Mm.
soul has learned and grown, but you still got to like start over back at the lowest levels and work your way up again.
Now, this is news to me because, like, some of what I understand besides NDEs is like what I, read from like the Law of One and things like that. And in that respect, it would make sense that you can go to another planet, but if you're already at, let's say, what they would consider densities or dimensions, if you're already in 3D, going 4D, 5D, etc., if you're at a 3D level or even a 4D level, you should be able to go to another planet that has a 3D or 4D level, And of course, we don't
Uh-huh.
know, what's what, but I would hope that because I feel like I'm going to be that person, that rare event where I'm like, I'm out of here. Give me another another place to go, and
Right.
then I don't want to come back as like a slug or something on another planet getting
I
squashed.
mean, maybe it's different when you reach a certain level, but I think
Yeah.
as you're progressing, I think if you at that point decide to jump over somewhere else, you've got to start back over again, wherever that
Wow.
lowest level is, and I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. So it's like you better maybe just stick to your own lane. Finish this, and then go on. Um, okay, so you had answered another question that I was going to ask about your different lives because I love to hear about the different lives. If you're able to see them in detail, and you mentioned that you had the one where you mentioned the one in, you said Europe, I think, where you were.
Right. I'm pretty sure it was
Yeah,
Europe. Yeah.
yeah. So you were the guy in the front like Braveheart, but you were the first one to go. You're like, let's go, and then
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
yeah.
I think it's funny. Like I think it's hilarious, but I was the first one to get killed.
Do you remember more exotic lives? Like, have you been black before? Have you been a female before? Have you been a king before?
I've definitely been a female before,
Mm,
um, and I think mainly I've been male, but I've definitely been female before. Um,
mm.
I saw that being a black person, that was one of the options that I had come into this life. But
You
um,
realize that was going to be too difficult.
well, no, I actually I haven't really talked about this, but I preferred that skin color as a soul. Like there's something about it I liked better. But
Mm,
the particular life that I was looking at, there's something about it that didn't work out.
mm,
And there's a couple that I looked at. But like, our souls are not black, white, male, female. Okay.
mm,
Um, we're independent of all that. And as we can um, learn to appreciate each other and look past these physical traits and just respect that, hey, this is another soul just like me.
mm.
We can get closer to connecting to each other and move to where we're supposed to be. But
Yeah.
some of the exotic lives, I mean, I think there was something back in ancient China. And again, I didn't like see the full life. I would see like a little snippet here, a little snippet there of a lot of
Yeah.
these different lives. And some of it's pretty interesting, but some of the mistakes I made, some of what I was seeing was mistakes that I had made that I'm pretty ashamed of. And it's frustrating to know that I was in a position to make a right decision and I didn't. And then I suffer the consequences, and then I've made the world a little bit better, worse place for everyone else also. But then, there are things I saw where it's like, well, I did some good here. There was I made some right decisions too. So it was a mixed
Yeah.
bag of good stuff and bad stuff.
Yeah.
There was one, hopefully I don't, I look, I'm a nice guy today. Okay. I'm not trying to hurt anybody.
We get that. No, look, Aaron, for real. Like when you called me, I was like, I like his energy. Like I'm like, it really feels like clean. And I can't explain it. That's literally the first thought that came to my mind. I know it's weird, but that I'm just saying it. So don't
Okay.
worry about
And
your
then
past
remember
lives.
the norms of today. we've made a ton of progress, but there's so many things that we're doing that's not at the highest level. You know, if you go 500 years in the future and look back at where you are right now, you're probably going to be pretty disappointed with some of that stuff that you're doing right now that you have no idea is the wrong thing, let alone the stuff you know is wrong and you're doing it
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah,
And so we got to be a little bit forgiving to the people in the past who have, that they didn't know any better, or
yeah,
maybe they did and they were still making the wrong decision because we've all been in a similar place and we've all made similar mistakes. So, try not to
yeah,
be too harsh on people in the past who have made those mistakes.
yeah. And I mean, when you mention the positive attributes of God, I just assume that being harsh is not part of it, you know.
Right.
So a lot of people, especially if you're a Christian, they get used to that, which to me is not God at all, but that's a whole other story. But that voice of God that's in the Old Testament, where it's just like murder, murder, kill, sacrifice, like,
Right.
judgment and all this type stuff. So while it's not where some people, like I said, just say everything's okay, do what you like, live your life, who cares about cause and effect. I don't think it's that extreme, but it's also not where it's just extreme when you got to just have shame for previous lives. Like,
Right.
shame is very low on the vibrational state
Right.
anyway. You don't want to feel shame for too long ever, because ultimately it's kind of a waste of time anyway if we are going to, whether we want to or not, clean up that karma. It's going to happen anyway, so why
Yeah.
feel bad about it? And here's a weird thought that came to my mind, that because remember, like we said, some people say that they come here in certain roles to be the bad guy so that it works out for the whole play,
Right.
so there might have been times that you did something what you would consider bad, and you're looking back at that life, and maybe about to feel shame, but maybe it was part of something, like you said, as you mentioned this, something similar a little bit later, where you are standing in a place so that somebody else can learn something.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? So like, even though for you it was a bad deed, or you'll see that, or you consider it that, it might have been you standing in a place to do something so that somebody can learn a lesson that they needed to learn, or to make the choice that they needed to make. Because we're just that interconnected, where that might happen at times. We
Yeah.
can't. You
I think it's a mix, and we don't always know what's what. Some of it is just
Yes.
we're making bad decisions, and some of it is we're put in certain positions because the part it plays in other people's lives, and we don't always know. But the way I see it is the right answer is always to try to reach towards that higher level of love and all the manifestations of love. Uh,
Mhm.
that's the right decision regardless of if you need to be in a certain negative position. Don't worry about it. That's God's problem. God will twist you into that negativity. You don't
Yeah.
need to seek it out or try to
Yeah.
be a bad guy because you think it's going to be better for the other. You're going to be helpful for
Yeah.
someone else. um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't I
I,
wouldn't I wouldn't want someone to like think, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to be a bad guy, and
yeah.
that
Yeah.
you know
I could see. I'm glad you played up, because I could see somebody saying, "Oh, look, I'm doing this for your own good.
right.
Give me your money."
Right.
So yeah. So
I definitely wouldn't want anybody to get that idea. We need to try to be nice and kind and loving to other people. And if God's going to twist, or if we had agreed to some kind of twist that we do something negative, that'll work itself out. We don't
yeah.
have to try to make it happen.
Yes. Exactly. Okay. And so okay. All right. I like this part too. So you mentioned that older souls, and we have to clarify this. This is very similar to what we just got finished talking about, where you said sometimes it's a mix, and that we really can't, some things are just for God to be worrying about in managing this whole puzzle, and
Right.
some things that we just do from our viewpoint and from our, perspective, is our role or whatever. Because some people take, and we can see this very clearly with what happened. Because while I totally agree with you that the West needs to understand and wake up to reincarnation. It's just a thing. It really is just a thing.
Right.
Um, uh, there are people in the East who have been believing this for ages, and there are some that use those principles or those ideas to put others down. So
Right.
you had like the untouchables, and things that are created from the idea that if you're having a bad life, then you're supposed to have a bad life.
Right.
And we can't, and that just shows you how human thinking is. It really is in black and white, and you're trying to paint everything red instead of, you know, painting in the lines, and changing
Yeah.
up the colors. So so you mentioned that for older souls that they might have more freedom to pick their life. do you, and I think you kind of answered this by saying that we have the volunteers, because my question initially was going to be, do you think that if, for example, like say I'm an older soul and I can pick my life, oh, I'm coming in, I want to be rich, I want to live, I want
Right,
a castle, I want it all, vacation life.
right.
Or do you think some of them say, because they're that older soul and more wise and understand what the end result is and the whole purpose of the all, that they would be the ones that would sacrifice the most and come in as that, somebody with extreme disability,
Right.
extreme, oppression, and try to, make it work in that way?
Okay. Well, first I want to address the untouchables idea. Um, I think that's I know that there's people with that viewpoint. I think it's a complete perversion of what's going on here. Yeah, there's people who have messed up in previous lives, and maybe that's caused them to not have the best life now. But we're never meant to like look down on them or mistreat them or be mean to people, regardless of whatever their situation is. We want to be kind and compassionate and loving to everybody. Within reason. I get it if someone's shooting up the mall, you're not going to hand them more ammunition or something. You know,
Mm.
but within logical reason, we want to be as good as we can to other people and not worry about whatever mistakes they've made in their past. That's going to play itself out. I think to have that kind of mindset, you're setting yourself to look down on other people. You're setting yourself up to be in that position in the future, just so that you can learn the compassion that you need to. Like we need
Mhm.
to be loving to people, regardless of regardless of what sort of position they have in life. We got to try to be good to everybody. Um, the other thing is, like I had the freedom to choose a really good looking person. Okay. For whatever reason, I've reached the level where that was an option to me. But I've also fortunately reached the level where I could see the downside of that. I think as a person, it seems like, well, being a really good looking, rich person, like that's just perfect, right? That's just great. But as a spiritual entity, especially when you reach a certain level, you can recognize that, hey, that's a very risky proposition. And if you're not properly ready for it, you're just setting yourself up for all kinds of frustration and difficulties in the future because you're not you don't have the self-restraint necessary to live a good life with all that money and that good looking or whatever it is, or a king, for example. Like you might really be setting yourself up for some future misery. Some of
Mhm.
these dictators in the world who were born into that position, they seem like they're making poor choices to me, and they're setting themselves up for receiving the consequences of their own choices, and some of that's not going to be too pretty. You could make a negative decision that could really play off for multiple lifetimes. Like you might have a great time for a couple of years, but you could really be screwing yourself over in the future. And I think I think most souls are going to be very weary of choosing to be a prince or a king if they're not ready to make good choices. And you know, just because we might be able to choose that doesn't mean we're going to choose it because there's so many downsides. It's such a risky proposition. It's a much safer bet or easier or less risky bet if we choose a simpler life without the all the power and money that some people may have, because no matter how bad you screw it up, if you're not a powerful person, there's only so much bad you can do and only so much future frustration you can create for yourself.
Yes, yes. And I think it also ties into the life review too. Like I just think, like what if somebody's like the king's torturer or something like that, and he has to go through
Right.
that life review where he's feeling all the pain he gave.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll pass. I'll pass. You know.
Oh yes, because
So
like
you're mentioning like you might be too good looking or stuff like that. And I mean I've literally I've dated somebody who was on billboards, and it was probably one of the worst relationships of my life. I saw every day how this person, just
Right.
because he got so much and everybody was just running to try to do everything for them, that it made him into not to say it made it, but it made it very easy to not be a good person.
Right.
Very easy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and eventually, what we have to deal with the repercussions of what we do, our actions. Um, so yeah, I totally understand that somebody who's more wise would really pay attention and not just make every life after that a vacation life.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know.
What would be amazing is if you could get to the level where you have the self control and restraint to make the right decisions and the ability to choose a more powerful position so you could really make the world a better place. That
Yeah,
would be great. But I think by the time most people reach that level, they leave this earthly realm, and they move on to much, much happier places.
yes,
Um, you know, people don't want to be here for their souls don't want to be on earth forever. I think most souls, when they reach that level, they're out of here. Maybe at the
yeah,
most, a couple lifetimes to help the rest of us. But
yeah,
a lot of souls when they reach that level, I don't think they're coming back here.
yes, yes. Um, yeah, and I love that you said that you wanted to be a redheaded girl because I loved Annie growing up. So I think I too wanted to be a redheaded girl. But I'm starting to realize that, the pluses of living the life that I've lived and gone through the things that I've gone through, it makes me the person that I am today. And uh what was I gonna say? So the other thing is for people, like some people have come into like really tough family situations. Like you'd be surprised to hear some of these stories. It's like almost unreal. You
Yeah.
wouldn't believe the stories are so bad. So
Right.
for those people, like just given the ideas that are kind of being brought up here, it could be because it's for learning. So it's something to teach the soul and to enhance the soul in some way. It could be karma, so like the cleaning up karma of things that maybe they did before, if they coming from a
Right.
controlling mother, maybe they were a controlling mother at one point. It could be to heal that family. Like a lot of people talk about ancestral healing, like the cleansing the generational curses and things like that. So it could
Right.
be like you're a higher level soul. And there's a woman who actually is telling her story on YouTube where she's saying that, I mean, I'm not going to go into details. It really was horrible, but just a horrendous family
Right.
situation.
Right.
But when she died, in the process of dealing with that family, she went to a space where she realized that she is a very highly advanced soul, and she was coming to
Okay.
and this actually kind of ties into what we were saying before. So part of it is for her to be in that role where like no other normal human being could be in that and not break. So they knew that she would be strong enough to undergo the things that she would have to undergo, but to also to gradually help to heal that energy or to
Right. Right.
transmute it, whatever.
Right.
So it could be a lot of reasons. Like don't, I think for a lot of the things that we're talking about, we have to make it very clear that it's a convoluted universe. There's a lot of different reasons why these things could be happening,
Yeah.
and you might not know until you leave. So just do your best. It's kind
Yeah.
of
I fully realize that some people are going through really, really difficult situations, and I have nothing but compassion for that. And we don't know why someone's going through all these difficult, situations. It could be a lot of different reasons. Um, but we just got to trust that, hey, this is all part of a bigger plan, and eventually we'll get through this. And all we can do is try to forgive those who have hurt us, and try to work to make this world a better place, and to love others.
yes, yes. So at one point you mentioned like you were calling what I guess what some people would call karma, you were calling baggage, right? So soul baggage, right?
Right.
You said there's multiple ways to get rid of that baggage, and one of them, of course, is to re-experience what you kind of, get
Right.
what you put out. What eh, did you have? Do you know other ways that people
Right.
could?
I definitely got the impression, pretty clearly, that some souls, they have a choice. They can either get rid of that baggage quickly, by going through a hellacious experience where they experience the full spiritual consequence of their action, and they would learn very quickly, from that, or they could drag it out longer and, have re-experienced something during, maybe multiple lifetimes, for example. Um, so what I was referring to is, some of this stuff you could work out in the spiritual realm, and some of the stuff you could work it out in the physical realm, and, to some degree, that's a choice that the souls have to make. So
Mm,
I was referring to that, but, um, I think God has more than one way for us to work out this baggage, and we
mm,
can also, if something seems too difficult, we could drag it out over multiple lifetimes, or we could go through something really, really hard, and be done with it, and learn our lessons quickly. And,
mm.
I think it's left up to each soul to figure out how they want to, work through their issues.
Yes, yes. I sometimes think I have immediate karma. Like when people talk about instant karma, I really do feel like it's just like whatever if I thank God I don't go around just really trying to hurt people, but anytime I've done something wrong, I feel like it comes back immediately.
Right.
I do wonder sometimes though, for those that come back as helpers or the volunteers or the different names we have, earth angels, etc., do you think it is possible for them to fall or to lose, their advancement through their actions here? Or do they, some others also talk about people who have karma, they can't get karma, like they might
Right.
have, so do you think that that's also do you think that each one of those actually exists? Do you think that one is true over the other, or that it's like a case by case thing?
I think for a higher level soul, they can't like lose their progress, but they can definitely create negative karma for themselves, and they're going to have to fix that karma one way or another. But I think they've maintained whatever progression they've made.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
All right. All right. And so then I love the idea that what you were talking about with there being the different spiritual realms. So we got to make it clear that Earth is physical and
Right.
that we're here to work things out in a way that we can't work them out in the spiritual realms, because the spiritual realms are really like with like, like you're
Yes.
with
Absolutely.
and this again should be motivation. If you believe this, if this resonates with you, this should be motivation to increase your vibe. Like you want to be in a space where you're not that person who's not, like still among the murderers and the killers, but you're getting killed more than you're killing. Well, you don't want to be at the bottom of the barrel in a place like that.
Right.
So work your way up to get better so that you can be in a better place. Um, and sorry. So let me see. Okay, I asked that question. I think I've asked most of the questions. So how did you know that your mother was a helper soul? Was that something that came to you through your guides or through a download?
When I was choosing this life, I took a good look at both of my parents, and I knew what kind of people they were and what their role was in life, and where they were in their spiritual development. It was like um, it's self-evident, I guess, and the guides were kind of like showing me this. I'm not exactly sure what the mechanism was, but I had an excellent idea of what kind of people they were, what kind of parents they would be, and where they were on their spiritual realm. And even uh, even for my mother, I knew some of the spiritual agreements that she had worked out prior to her life. There's some agreements that she has with some of her relatives that are important. They're spiritually significant, and I was able
Mm,
to see that. Somehow it was just that information was all available to me. There was nothing
wow.
hidden on that level.
Wow, wow. I wish more people had access to this information. It would make the world, I think, a lot, better to some extent.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's part of the plan is we need to learn to trust each other. And there's so many people, so many millions of people who have had this kind of experience that someone who has not had this kind of experience can just listen to some of them and learn the important stuff about how this all works.
yeah, you kind of mentioned the different scenarios that like maybe a soul could be in well, really in a negative world. It's only really a way of getting out of a negative spiritual world, because it's all just positive. They don't advance unless they come back to Earth. Um, but for like somebody who is like, say for instance now, like say war just broke out and we're all like, we gotta fend for ourselves. What is in your mind the positive reaction to dealing with something that is like extremely either oppressive or extremely violent? Like how does the more spiritually, like what do you think in your mind is the response to that would be looked at as a good thing or a positive response?
What for a person who's stuck in a horrible situation?
Well, I'm saying like extremes, like because you like war, like war, like it's like a world war or something like that,
Yeah, right.
or oppression, like, or like you have a life and death type situation. That's really, I mean, I'm asking, this is a very tough question. Like this is one
Yeah,
that probably
yeah,
has no answer, but I just feel like even if there is no answer, just to ask, because that's what people wonder sometimes. Like it's all fine and dandy if you're living like this life where everything is just, like you said, being in America as opposed to a third world country, or
right,
being, somewhere where it's just comfortable as opposed to where you're, worrying about how you're going to drink clean water and you got people with guns in your face.
right.
So what is the spiritually advanced way to respond in situations like that? So that you can move up and not move down, you know.
Yeah, I think I don't advocate like total pacifism. Like World War II, I think it was pretty clear that America, needed to respond to this the really horrible stuff that Germany and Japan were doing at the time. Um, and I recognize that other, parts of the world, there's some really bad stuff going on. So what I would say is, what's your intention? Are you trying to hurt people? Are you trying to torture and kill other people? Or are you trying to protect other people? Are your actions um, malicious, excessively violent? Are you just out to kill people because you want to kill people? Or are you trying to, I don't know, overthrow a dictator or create a better living condition for those around you? What are your goals? I think that would be what you really would have, what a person would really have to focus on is what are you doing, and why are you doing it? And if you are trying to uh, create a better world for those around you, you want to do that with the least violence you can. You don't want to torture prisoners, for example. You don't want to rape someone that there's no positive spiritual benefit from rape. That's not where we should be going. Um, so I think different soldiers doing that appeared to be doing the exact same thing from an outsider's perspective. Spiritually, they might be very different based on what their intention is and what their thinking is. So, everyone's got to try to figure that out for themselves. But I would encourage people in like really crazy difficult scenarios to use as little violence as they can. um, make sure that their goals are pure and they're trying to help somebody, help their neighbors, or help their relatives, and they're not filled with hatred towards anybody. And I think if they try to focus on that, maybe they'd get a little better result. I think definitely there's been in history some wars where it just kind of it was almost necessary for human development that we go through some of this stuff just so because I think we spiritually learn so much by going through these really difficult things. Um, but I don't know. Hopefully that answered your question. I think
No, no, it not only did it answer it, I think you answered it perfectly. Like I think that that is the answer that we all need to hear and to know is that it comes down to the heart and to the intention a lot of times. Because
right. Yeah.
remember, we all, we can't judge one another. We can't. We truly can't. The only one who can really see your heart and know your intention and judge you by that is God, period.
Right.
And I think that in these situations where it really gets a little hairy and like we look at it and go, I don't know. I don't know. God's like, no, I know,
Oh yeah, God. But like all this, some of this stuff is really confusing to look at and to know exactly who's right and wrong. And it's not always clear. It's not like there's a good guy and a bad guy. That's not how this works. But all of the different iterations and every contributing factor and everything that a person has experienced leading them up to that point, like all of that during a life review and to God, like that's like an open book and it's easily known, and it's confusing to us, but on the spiritual side it's not confusing at all. And I think the best a person could hope for in that kind of confusing, difficult situation is to try to make sure that their intentions are focused on helping others rather than hurting or hating anybody. And I think that
Yeah.
would help uh, make these conflicts go a little bit better the way they're supposed to, as opposed to some of the horrible, torturous stuff that you see that's just not going
Yeah.
to lead to any benefit for anybody.
Yes. Like I said, perfect answer, I think. And we're winding down very close to the end. So these are kind of like the basic questions that I had. Uh, when you finally realized what happened and you started to realize your NDE and you clearly went straight to being public, which totally commend you for that, especially with your background. Like I know engineers, like I feel
Right.
like I should have been an engineer. Part of me should have been an engineer.
Yeah.
So I totally understand that world. So what has been your response, the response to you sharing your NDE or you not sharing it in certain circles?
It's been a total mixed bag. Um, there's been, I've had plenty of people look at me like I'm crazy or insane. And then I've had people that really, I think, appreciate what I'm saying. And then everywhere in between. Um, it's kind of been all over the map. And my personal approach is I'm happy to share with anybody who wants to listen. But if they don't want to hear what I have to say, that's fine. They don't have to. And I'm not going to try to force my experience on anybody.
Yeah. I personally commend you and am grateful that you're sharing it because yours is, like I said, one of the absolute best, and there's a lot that we can learn from this. Like
Thank
it
you.
really could help the world. So I thank you for that. Did you get any paranormal gifts afterwards? Like, did you feel like you had, any heightened senses?
I think my intuition or conscience is maybe a little better than it is for other people. I feel like um, I think it's called women's intuition. We all have some intuition. I think that's our spiritual guides trying to say, hey, you can do what you want to do, but hey, I recommend you go this route. And if we can listen to our intuition, I think it's going to help us move in the right direction. And sometimes I feel like something I'm going to say or do that, hey, that's not the right thing. That's not the way you should be doing it. And I try to listen to that intuition and go the other way because I think it's going to end up being the spiritually better choice. So I think
Mm.
maybe my intuition's a little bit better, but other than that, I don't feel like I have any kind of I don't know gifts that some other people might have.
Okay. Well, I mean, your gift is the story, without question. Like this story is a gift, like receiving it again, as opposed to it just being washed away. The second to last question is there anything that we haven't covered here that you feel like you want to share?
Yeah, there was one other thing I meant to mention, but I didn't, uh, and that's animals. Like it was very clear to me that animals are on their own spiritual journey. How humans ever got to the idea that it's just humans that like that's all God cares about in this whole universe, it's kind of beyond me. But look, there's clearly more than humans, both in terms of there's spiritual beings across the universe, but then there's a multitude of spiritual beings on this planet. It's not just humans, and dogs and cats and other animals, like they've got their own spiritual journey. And likewise, how we're supposed to love our neighbors, other people, and be kind and compassionate towards them, we should try to be more kind and compassionate towards the animals that share this planet with us and try to
Mm,
treat them well. I think, you know, I personally experienced that animals, have a spiritual journey during my NDE, but other people have described it as well. I remember one guy I read about, he had like beaten a goat or something. He was like really mean to this animal, and during his life review, he got to feel how he had made that animal feel. He got to feel the times that he had hit the animal. Um,
mm.
and we need to do a little bit better job of just trying to look out for animal welfare and just try to be decent to these animals that share the planet with us
Yes,
because
yes.
because they have a spiritual journey similar to ours.
I totally agree, and I feel like that's why when I had my last spiritual awakening, I was really kind of forced to be a vegetarian. Like I got to the point where I couldn't eat meat without getting sick. It was like I could not do it. And but prior to that, I had spent some time, fishing. Like I was becoming a serious angler.
Okay.
And while I didn't eat or kill the fish, or at least not knowingly kill the fish, whatever, I now when I look back at it and as I become more sensitive, I realize, oh wow, like what
Right.
was I doing? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I feel like part of it, instead of having the shame, because it just kind of goes into the next thing, instead of having the shame, remember it's all about the intention. So while I was being an angler, at no point did I think, oh, I'm doing a really horrible thing and I love it. Yay,
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
me. I had it for doing it for other reasons, right? So I think that our intent, like you said, really does come into play in regards to that. And then if even if we are like, say we're going to hypnotherapy or we're having an NDE or seeing past lives in meditations or visualizations, and you see things that make you feel that low vibrational shame, people don't understand that besides the fact that it's all part of a process, people don't understand that that's also the reason for the mind wipe. Like people who believe in the soul trap say, oh, why do we have to keep starting over and not remembering our previous lives? Besides the fact that it would just we'd be walking around like complete psychos because we're
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
through 20 million different lives at once.
Right.
um, it also one of the biggest reasons I wanted to mention it because it ties into what you're saying here and it kind of can help somebody out there is the fact that it helps to erase, not to say erase the shame, but you don't feel the shame because you don't
Right.
remember what you might have done and you have a chance to do better now
Yeah.
because you're not tied to, oh, I was this really bad guy, so now I have to be this really bad girl or guy now. No, you have the chance to start anew, blank
Right.
slate.
Right.
And I love that, you know. So the last question we've got there is like, if you could give a message to all mankind or anyone who watched this video, what would it be?
Yeah, the most to me it boils down to two things. One is recognizing that yeah, God really does exist. It's true. None of the religions have it perfectly figured out, but yeah, there is a God, and that you need to understand that God is wonderful. Okay, loving, kind, compassionate, all the stuff you would want from God, and not the horrible stuff that you don't want God to be. Okay, God is perfect. And the other part of that would be that we're on a journey where we need to freely choose to be more loving, and all the manifestations of love: kindness, compassion, honesty, empathy, reliability, patience, forgiving. And that, that's the way we need to live our lives, is by working to have that kind of thinking where we care about those around us, and where we act on those kind of loving thoughts, and try to make the world a better place and help those around us. And I think regardless of anything else I've said or any other religion out there, if people could just focus on helping their neighbor, being more loving and compassionate to those around them, they will make this world a better place, and they will help themselves progress to a happier existence in the future. And that's the most important part of all these near death experience messages, is just that we need to work on loving God and loving our neighbor. And to me, that's the most important message from all this.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, Aaron. In closing, I'm just going to say that we thank you for your courage in sharing this experience at a time when most of the world is still sleeping and don't understand that we're more than this body. I surround you, dear brother Aaron, with divine love and light to guide you for the rest of your earthly experience. And I do thank you again for your time and for sharing this amazing, amazing NDE experience.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much.